It was an ordinary evening when my parents left for a weekend getaway, leaving me home alone. I was used to being by myself, but this particular night would become a harrowing tale of true home alone horror. As darkness settled over our quiet suburban neighborhood, I settled into my routine. I made dinner, watched some TV, and eventually retired to my bedroom. The gentle hum of the house settling into the night surrounded me. Around midnight, I was startled awake by a sound, a faint scratching coming from the direction of the hallway. My heart raced as I lay there, listening. The noise grew louder, as if something were scraping against the walls. Gathering my courage, I crept out of my room, clutching a baseball bat for protection. The hallway was dimly lit, and I felt a sense of unease that I couldn't shake. The scratching seemed to be coming from the walls themselves, as if they were trying to communicate. As I moved closer to the source of the sound, I noticed a strange pattern on the wallpaper, a series of intricate symbols etched into the paper. They pulsed with an eerie, faint light, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. That's when I heard it, a whisper, barely audible, but unmistakable. It seemed to come from behind the wall, as if a voice were trapped within. The voice was desperate, pleading for release. Fear washed over me, but curiosity compelled me to investigate further. I pressed my ear against the wall, listening intently. The voice grew clearer, the words forming a chilling message. "Help me, please. It won't let me go." My blood ran cold as I realized that the voice was coming from inside the walls of my own home. I rushed to my parents' bedroom, searching for any clues. The scratching had spread to every room, the symbols now covering the walls like a sinister tapestry. I tried to call my parents, but there was no signal. Panic set in as I realized that I was truly alone in this nightmare. The voice from the walls continued to plead, its desperation echoing through the house. In a desperate bid for answers, I grabbed a utility knife and carefully began to peel back the wallpaper. Beneath it, I found a hidden compartment, a tiny, cramped space where someone had been imprisoned. The air inside was stale and suffocating. I recoiled in horror as I realized the truth. The house on Elm Street had a dark history, and it seemed to be trying to communicate with me. The voice from within the walls grew louder, more frantic, as if it were reaching out from a long-forgotten nightmare. I couldn't save whoever was trapped there, but I could no longer stay in that house. With trembling hands, I fled into the night, leaving behind the haunting whispers and symbols etched into the walls. To this day, I can't forget the terror of that night, the true home alone horror that unfolded within the very walls of my own house. The house on Elm Street held a sinister secret, one that I could never fully understand but would haunt me forever. Home alone for the weekend, I relished the freedom of having the house to myself. My parents had gone on a short trip, and I was determined to enjoy my solitude. Little did I know that my peaceful weekend would take a terrifying turn into a true home alone horror story. It was a Friday night, and I settled into the living room with a stack of movies, determined to have a movie marathon. The soft glow of the TV and the familiar comfort of my surroundings put me at ease. The evening passed without incident, and I felt a sense of contentment. Around midnight, I decided it was time for bed. As I climbed the stairs to my room, I heard a faint sound, an odd scratching noise, coming from somewhere below. My heart skipped a beat, and I hesitated on the staircase, straining to identify the source. The scratching grew louder, more persistent, and I realized it was coming from the front door. Fear gripped me as I tiptoed down the stairs, my mind racing with thoughts of potential intruders. I peeked through the peephole, but there was no one there. Just as I was about to dismiss it as a figment of my imagination, a soft voice whispered from the other side of the door. "Let me in," it pleaded, barely audible, but undeniably real. My blood ran cold, and I stood frozen in fear. Who could be outside my door at this hour, and why were they asking to be let in? I summoned the courage to ask, "Who are you?" Silence followed, and then the voice replied, "It's me, your father. Let me in." The voice sounded exactly like my father, but something about it was off. Unnatural, almost mechanical. Panic surged through me as I realized that my parents were away, and there was no reason for my father to be outside. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding. The voice continued to plead, growing more insistent. It repeated phrases I had heard my father say, as if it were trying to mimic him perfectly, but I knew my father was miles away. Terrified and unsure of what to do, I called my father on his cell phone, my fingers trembling. His voice on the other end of the line confirmed my worst fear. He was still at their destination, far from home. As I spoke to my real father, the voice outside the door began to change, a guttural, inhuman sound that sent shivers down my spine. My father, sensing my panic, told me to call the police immediately. I dialed 911, my voice shaky as I explained the situation. The operator assured me that help was on the way, and I huddled in a corner, my eyes fixed on the front door. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. The voice outside the door continued to mimic my father's words, growing more and more distorted. When the police finally arrived, they found no one outside. They assured me that the area was secure and that it was likely a prank or a disturbed individual. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something otherworldly had visited that night, a chilling and inexplicable true Home Alone horror story that still haunts my nights. One weekend, my parents had to attend a family event out of town, leaving me alone in our cozy suburban home. I was a teenager, old enough to fend for myself, or so we thought. That weekend would become the backdrop for a true Home Alone horror story that defied explanation. On the first night, I relished the solitude. I ordered pizza, watched movies, and reveled in the freedom of having the house to myself. Everything seemed perfectly ordinary until the second night. Around midnight, I was in my bedroom, engrossed in a book, when I heard it, a faint, unmistakable whisper coming from the hallway. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to make out the words. "Come here," the voice whispered. It sounded like my mother's voice, sweet and soothing. My initial thought was that my parents had returned unexpectedly, but something about it felt off, as if it were a distorted imitation. I left my room and tiptoed down the hallway, a house bathed in darkness. The voice continued to beckon, leading me toward the staircase. The closer I got, the more the voice seemed to change, its tone becoming unsettlingly robotic. I hesitated on the staircase, torn between fear and curiosity. The voice urged me to come down, to join it in the darkness. As I stood there, paralyzed, a shadowy figure appeared at the bottom of the stairs. It was a silhouette, human in form, but eerily featureless. Fear surged through me, and I turned to retreat to my room, slamming the door behind me and locking it. I grabbed my phone and called my mother, who confirmed that they were still out of town. Panic set in as I realized that someone, or something, was in the house with me. I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate, as if the intruder were taunting me. The voice returned, now sounding like my father's, and it grew louder, more insistent. "Come out now," it commanded. Terrified, I called 911 and hid in my closet, clutching a baseball bat for protection. The police arrived quickly and conducted a thorough search of the house. They found no signs of forced entry, no intruder, and no explanation for the mysterious voice. They assured me that it might have been a prank call or a vivid nightmare, but I knew what I had heard was real. I spent the rest of the weekend at a neighbor's house, unable to shake the feeling that our home held a sinister secret. To this day, the true horror of that night remains a chilling mystery, an unexplained and unsettling encounter with an unseen intruder in the supposed safety of my own home.